بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله وكفى والسلام على عباده الذين اصطفى أما بعد وقد قال الله تبارك وتعالى أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا كتب عليكم الصيام كما كتب على الذين من قبلكم لعلكم تتقون صدق الله العظيم. So firstly, Assalamu alaikum to everyone, and mashallah, it's nice to see some familiar faces as well as some new faces. We have basically 4 sessions, inshallah, before Ramadan is upon us. And therefore, what we intend to do, inshallah, is over the next few weeks, look at Ramadan from a few different perspectives. And we understand that the majority of us sitting here are relatively new to Islam, so it's going to be very basic and something that we can all understand. And for those of us that are seasoned Muslims already, then you will find all of this very familiar and will know most of it already, but there's nothing wrong with renewing our knowledge. So we've got a little bit, not pressed for time, but because Maghrib is just around the corner. So what we're going to do is I'm going to start, that at 7:30 we will stop for Salah. Whatever's remaining, we can finish it, inshallah, post Maghrib, inshallah. But what I intend to do for the first 2 weeks, so we have 4 weeks, for the first 2 weeks, I want to go through this, the significance of fasting in Ramadan and understanding the spiritual importance behind it, and look at some other related matters. Because the first question some of us may have is, why do I have to fast? Has anyone, and I want this to be somewhat interactive, so if you don't understand something, I don't want you to be shy, I want you to put your hand up. I'm also going to ask some questions, and so I want it to be somewhat interactive, inshallah. Whoever thought why, I'm going to ask why do we fast? Why do Muslims fast? It's not just because after fasting you become more slim, right? That's not the reason. But can anyone, just off the top of your head, what have you understood from why do we fast? Everyone's thinking, wow.
Isn't there suffering part of that? Isn't there
a suffering?
Yeah, self-suffering. You
mean putting yourself through some difficulty? Yes. Yeah, that's part of it, yeah. And the sisters can feel free to shout out what's one word or something that for you, what's the reason why we fast? Did one of the sisters say something? No? Okay. All right, so in the beginning I recited a verse of the Quran wherein Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, O you who believe, Kutiba alaykum as-siyam, fasting has been prescribed upon you. When it says upon you, meaning the followers of the Prophet Muhammad's peace and blessings be upon him, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. In other words, us who have said the Shahada, we are Muslim, fasting has been prescribed for us. Now, then Allah informs us that you have not been singled out. So we're not picking on you as a Muslim nation, that we have prescribed Kutiba alaykum as-siyam kama kutiba ala alladhina min qablikum. Allah mentions that we actually prescribed all the previous nations that came before you, they also had to fast, right? What form was their fasting? You know, like for example, if you talk to Catholics over the Easter period that's coming now, then they have a period called Lent where they supposedly fast, right? But my understanding of their fasting is you can still eat fish and you can have hot cross buns and Milo. Okay, that's their version of fasting. But the remnants of that is that in even Christian tradition, because obviously we believe the Prophet Jesus was a Muslim and all prophets of God were preaching the same faith, right? That it shows that there was some significance of previous people that came before us who also fasted, right? And then Allah doesn't leave it as that. So He says, I prescribe fasting for you, and those before you also fasted, so don't feel hard done by. And then Allah gives us the answer as to why we are fasting. And that is, لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ. It's a grammatical thing, but in Arabic when you say la'alla, it is saying that perhaps you will attain tattaqun, you will attain piety through it. Fasting, for many of us, we're thinking, oh, no food, no drink, no this, no that. But we're not thinking the fasting is so that we can attain a spiritual transformation within us. And therefore many Ramadans go, and some people lose weight, become more slim, and some put on weight in Ramadan somehow. Try and do the maths on that, right? And we'll talk about that too, like when you break your fast, how should you break your fast? And some go through it and come out of it spiritually enlightened. It's a life-changing experience. And others, the Ramadan just passes and, I just stayed hungry the whole month and that was it. So we're going to look at now, we'll see how much we can get through this evening, but I don't want to rush. Am I going at an okay pace right now? Is everyone with me? I'm not losing anyone. So we're going to look at, this will be over the next 2 weeks, understanding Ramadan. So we will explore the meaning of Ramadan and the key practices associated with fasting during this holy month. We will have an emphasis on the spiritual significance, right? Because like I said, Allah Himself mentions the spiritual significance, including, like our brother said, that suffering that a person, not suffering, but a little bit of hardship that a person goes through in Ramadan, there's a certain discipline that comes with it. And so therefore fasting is something which brings about discipline in us in many different ways. It's very spiritually enlightening for a person to fast, right? Today it's the in thing to fast. People do, what do they call it?
Intermittent fasting.
Intermittent fasting, right? Those of us that have been to Malaysia, no offense if anyone's Malaysian here, but they eat a lot. And they eat, well, somebody put it to me, they eat a lot, no, they eat little often, right? So like every 2 hours there's something. So somebody said they do intermittent fasting. So I said, how long do you fast for? He said, I fast from breakfast to lunch, lunch to afternoon tea to dinner. So to him, that's his fasting. So we'll look at the discipline aspect and also the community impact. And this is where I think as new Muslims, for me personally, I remember my first Ramadans as a new Muslim. It was exciting. I didn't really know what was going on initially, but it's an exciting time on the Muslim calendar. There's a different atmosphere, and we'll explain why. One of the reasons is that in the month of Ramadan, as soon as the moon is sighted, the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessing be upon him, said that all the shayateen, all the devils are chained. Right? All the devils that are usually whispering in our ears throughout the whole year, right? They are chained, and there's a change in the atmosphere, actual change, and you can feel it. And that's why you find in Ramadan, people that you don't see the whole year, you'll see them in Ramadan. It shouldn't be that way, but the fact is that that influence is no longer there. So Allah makes it easy for us by chaining the shayateen and fasting by day, praying by night, and this beautiful atmosphere is created. Now, as new Muslims, even though we may not fully understand the concept of fasting, maybe some of us are struggling with the aspect of fasting. Nevertheless, that doesn't take away from the community impact it has by us engaging in the community activities during Ramadan, because it's a buzz, right? Every mosque in the world is a buzz, and there's a buzz in the atmosphere. So we, as new Muslims, we shouldn't shy away from it. Do what you can. We'll talk about, how much can you do, how much should you do. But the community impact of Ramadan, emphasizing the importance of charity as well in this month, the spirit of giving, and not receiving in Ramadan is even more emphasized, and helping those who are needy. So we're going to look at these three aspects. So understanding Ramadan, so hopefully we'll get through this one and then we'll probably break for Maghrib inshallah. Understanding Ramadan, right? There's, when I first became Muslim, I knew a person named Ramadan. His name was Haji Ramadan. So it was a bit confusing, but he's not a person. Ramadan is one of the months of the 12 Islamic months, right? The significance of Ramadan is it's a sacred month for Muslims, marking a time for reflection, prayer, and spiritual growth. It's a month in which the Quran was also revealed during this month. So we say the Quran was revealed to the Lawhul Mahfuz. The Lawhul Mahfuz is a preserved tablet in the heavens, and the Quran in its entirety was revealed to those tablets in the heavens. And then over a period of 23 years, the angel Gabriel, or Jibril alayhi salam, he would bring the verses from there and reveal it to the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him. So when we say it's a month in which the Quran was revealed, it's not that the whole Quran was given to the Prophet Muhammad in one, here's the book. You know, like today when you become Muslim and someone here's a Quran, brother. You know, that everyone means, well, here's a Quran. Like the Quran took 23 years to be revealed, and you get given a Quran the day you say your Shahada, and like you're supposed to understand it from day one, right? The Quran wasn't given to the Prophet or just like that in one book, here it is. It was revealed over a period of 23 years, right? So significance of Ramadan, fasting practices. Fasting during Ramadan entails abstaining from food and drink. So in our third or fourth session, so in our third session, we will go into what is the fast technically. What do you have to do to ensure that your fast is valid? And basically it means refraining from food and drink from dawn until sunset, and fostering self-discipline, because there is also another prohibition during that time, and that is that we are prohibited to take any type of sexual pleasure, right? So that is also one of the things, so that part of self-discipline. Those are the three main things that form the structure of your fast, that from dawn until sunset, I will stay away from food, I will stay away from drink in all of its kinds, and any type of sexual enjoyment, right? Like I said, if there's any questions, we will have a Q&A session, or if a question pops in your mind, you can put up your hand and we can address it, inshallah. So that's the fasting practices. And then it's one of the five pillars of Islam. So fasting during Ramadan is one of the five pillars of Islam, highlighting the importance of faith and obedience. So everyone's familiar with the five pillars, I'm assuming. So what, if someone says, what makes up the basic summary of what Islam is, of which everything is based, is the five pillars of Islam. So we have five pillars of Islam. So let's just do a very quick, someone give me the first one.
Charity.
So charity is one of them. So zakat, what we call it. Anyone else? Salah, prayer. Shahada is obviously testifying that there's one Allah, that there is one God. And Hajj, good, the pilgrimage. And we have one more which we are discussing at the moment. Ramadan, right? So those are what we call the five pillars. If you see any building, even this building, if you have a look, obviously there's matters of engineering and stuff that goes into it, but you will see that there are certain places that are more reinforced. I don't know if it's the same on the ladies' side, but on this side, for the men's side, a building cannot sustain itself without those pillars. It has to have a strong foundation, and then it has to have pillars. And that's why in Islam, if you want to live your life as a Muslim, you have to uphold these five pillars. Because the moment you drop one of them, What happens if today, we get some sledgehammers and we start to knock out just this one pillar here on the side? The building may hold up for some time, but it's going to start to make an impact on the rest of the building. So to be a Muslim, you are obliged to follow these 5 principles, right? These 5 pillars, sorry, right? Now, obviously, as new Muslims, you're thinking, well, hang on, I haven't yet understood the pillars. You might not have knowledge of the pillars. So this is all a process. But once you have the knowledge of it, you understand what that pillar means, then you need to work on it. So prayer, we have to work on it, right? Prayer is always a work in progress, right? Prayer is something which we have to continuously work on. So prayer, giving charity, so that's obviously obligatory charity. This is not talking about charity that is given, just voluntarily. This is talking about the compulsory zakat or charity that we need to give, every Muslim needs to give on an annual basis, right? And then we have Ramadan that comes once a year. Hajj that you are obliged, if you have the means, to perform it at least once in a lifetime. Right? So it doesn't mean every year you have to do Hajj, but at least once in your lifetime you have to try and perform the Hajj. And which one have I left out? We spoke about the Shahada, right? So I think that's all of them. So Ramadan is one of the 5 pillars. If you call yourself a Muslim, if you believe in Allah and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the Prophet Muhammad, then you need to attempt to, it's obligatory for us to fast. Later on we're going to discuss what about, if you have some sickness, certain sicknesses may prevent us from fasting and things like that. Difficulty with fasting, we'll address that later. But for now, just understand from the foundation that unless you have a good excuse, that obligation of fasting is not lifted from us. Does everyone understand that? All right? So, further, what is Ramadan? The significance of Ramadan marks the month which I mentioned when the Quran was revealed. And it's a month of spiritual reflection. Like as I mentioned in the beginning, this month more than, so people get caught up with, there's fasting, and if you take the same word and you add an E before the A, what does it become?
Feasting.
Feasting, right? Unfortunately, Ramadan for many becomes feasting instead of fasting. And what I mean by that is, all of the significance goes on having parties. Iftar, we call them iftar parties, right? So what happens is, the whole focus goes towards food, which we're fasting by the day. So no one's saying you have to starve when you're breaking your fast, but it sort of negates the spiritual benefits when you finish your fasting with feasting, and then you've eaten like entree, you've eaten main, you've eaten desserts, you've had tea, and then you're sitting there like this, and now do you expect that you're going to be able to pick up yourself and go and pray in the masjid? Unlikely, right? That's why I don't know if you've seen in the month of Ramadan, we have the people who lead the prayer, they don't eat much, because they said if we ate, we would not be able to stand there. First of all, the burping and all of that happens, which is another phenomenon in Ramadan, so get ready for that one. Especially the garlic burps that come out, the samosa burps during Ramadan. But we'll talk about that. But the spiritual reflection and self-improvement, that should be like more than even the fasting, should just become like so second nature that to be honest, once you've tried it a few times, by the time you've gone past the first 5-6 days, the fasting becomes pretty easy after that, and you actually feel lighter. Today everyone's into detox. There's no better detox physically and spiritually than fasting. So the emphasis for all of us is Ramadan has to be this a time of spiritual reflection. And then we have the fasting practices, which is Muslims fast from dawn to sunset, refraining from food and drink to cultivate self-discipline and empathy for the less fortunate. Right, I think what we'll do is, because that's going to go on to as different section now, we'll probably break here. Adhan will take place, we'll perform prayer, and then we will make our way back, inshallah, and maybe finish off with one more section and then open it up for Q&A, inshallah. Just before Adhan is given, is there any questions right now that anyone has pertaining to what has been said so far? It's all good? Right, inshallah. I always give the example, although we're living in the era of, e-scooters, as children, I'm sure many of us would have experienced riding a bicycle up a hill. So what happens is, you know that you need to pedal fast enough and build up some momentum before you reach that hill. Because otherwise what happens is, if you don't have enough momentum, you not only find it difficult to pedal, but you will most likely start going backwards as well, or you may even fall off your bike. So the idea behind this short course over the next few weeks is that you've already started pedaling. So your legs are moving and you're pedaling, and the hill that we need to climb is the hill of Ramadan. So when we build up our momentum, a person will benefit the most out of Ramadan by the way they prepare for it. Right? So how we prepare, so the spiritual preparation, the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, mentioned at the onset of, so the 2 months that precede Ramadan is Rajab and Sha'ban. So the Prophet Muhammad, when the moon was sighted for the month of Rajab, he would say, Allahumma barik lana fi Rajab wa Sha'ban wa ballighna ila Ramadan. He used to make a supplication where he would say, Oh Allah, bless us in the month of Rajab and Sha'ban, the 2 months that precede Ramadan, and allow us to make it to Ramadan. So the preparation for Ramadan, it is said that some of the Muslims, the pious Muslims of the past, they used to prepare for Ramadan from 6 months in advance. Right? What you don't want to do is wake up one morning and someone tells you it's Ramadan. Because then you're not going to be in the right mindset, physically, emotionally. So that's what this course is, inshallah. So without realizing you've already started pedaling. So now it's up to you how much you want to pedal, inshallah, in preparation. So we'll continue. What are fasting practices in Ramadan? So basically, these terms will become more familiar with you as you go, if you don't know them already. There's something called suhoor. And the Prophet ﷺ has said, Fi suhoori barakah, that in the pre-dawn meal there is blessing. So now what some people do is they cheat. So they eat as much as they can the night before, and then they don't bother to get up to have the pre-dawn meal, which even the pre-dawn meal, even if it's just one date, even if it's just, some wheat bix, whatever it is, suhoor is the pre-dawn meal consumed before the fasting begins each day during Ramadan. That small meal, so the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, he has said, in this suhoor, in this little meal you have, is barakah, there is blessing in it. In other words, that little portion meal that you have in Ramadan is going to help you get through the day, right? And everyone's suhoor is different. SubhanAllah, there are some people that can eat a plate of biryani like this for suhoor. That's not really my cup of tea, but whatever you can, with the intention that this is following in the footsteps, the sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, and that it's going to give me that basic nourishment to get through the day. So that's how we start the day, is suhoor. Iftar is everyone's favorite part of the day. right? Iftar means opening, basically. So you're breaking your fast. So iftar is the meal that breaks the fast at sunset, often starting now. We'll go more into this in maybe the third and fourth session, but the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said the best thing to break your fast with is dates and water. So you can have one date, some water, and then you can, people have different practices. Some people sit down and eat, like I said, a 3-course meal, but at the very least, break your fast with the dates and water. And we are going to be preparing a calendar, inshallah, because sunset is not what your app says, right? The apps are reliable to a certain degree, but especially when it comes to Maghrib, which is sunset, it's usually a delay of about 3 to 4 minutes. Because if you're ever down by the beach and you happen to be there at Maghrib, check what the app time says, and usually it's, according to them, sunset is when the sun starts to move behind the horizon. But from the time the bottom of the sun touches the horizon until it disappears, it takes a time of about 3 to 4 minutes. So we will prepare the calendars, inshallah, and Brother David will post it on the group so it's available, and try and follow that time. All right, so that's when the sun goes down. As soon as you have conviction that the sun has gone down, you can then break your fast, and you're encouraged to break your fast immediately. As soon as, now some people, they still stay praying, and the time's already elapsed. No, the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, he said, when it's time to break your fast, right? But just make sure that the time is entered and then break your fast. And then spiritual growth during Ramadan. Ramadan is a time for self-discipline, reflection, spiritual growth, and encouraging increased prayers and Quran reading. Now, for many of us, obviously we may not be able to read Quran yet. For those of us who can read the Quran, then some attempt to finish reading the whole Quran in the month of Ramadan. Some comfortably do that. I know there's one elderly sheikh in South Africa who is renowned that on the first night of Ramadan, he will read the entire Quran in prayer and finish it. So it's actually like quite a phenomenon where everyone comes to the mosque, and some people bring their camping chairs and their coffees, because you can pray sitting down in voluntary prayers. So they come with camping chairs and their coffee, and the sheikh is standing, and after the night prayer he starts, and before the morning prayer he's completed the whole Quran. I'm only saying that not because I'm not giving you any ideas, but I'm just saying, just to give us that motivation that if somebody can read the whole Quran in one night, then we all need to just challenge ourselves as to how we interact with the Quran in the month of Ramadan. So the spiritual growth is, during the month of Ramadan, trying to connect ourselves with the Quran. So the Quran is read in its completion in the night prayer, a voluntary night prayer. So we'll talk about that later too, the Taraweeh, it's called. That is not compulsory, so you don't feel overwhelmed that, well, now I've fasted the whole day and I'm really struggling and now I have to go pray 20 rakats of prayer. Do what you can, right? But the more that you apply yourself, because in that the whole Quran is being recited. So sometimes, even if it means just being present in the masjid and just listening, it's quite an amazing thing that the whole Quran in Ramadan is read in its entirety. So they break it up into 30 chapters, more or less, and it's broken up and read over a period of whatever, 27 to 29 nights. And so that phenomenon in itself, that the whole Quran is being read, and even for you to hear the Quran, you may not understand it, but even that is a form of worship, just to hear the Quran. I'm sure you might have seen, people go around and they put Quran on non-Muslims' ears and see what their reaction is. So the Quran has the Quran is the words of Allah, right? It has such an impact on the hearts. So during Ramadan, the spiritual growth is how much we're going to connect ourselves to the Quran, listen to the Quran. And then during Ramadan, there's many lectures that take place during Ramadan, which surrounds usually on these aspects like self-discipline, what we call tazkiyah, which is purifying ourselves. Right? So Islam is not just the outer actions, but it's the inner actions. So making an effort in Ramadan and encouraging increased prayers as much as you can, as much Quran reading as we can. Now I'll finish on this one and then we'll open up for Q&A. So the spiritual significance of fasting, purification of the soul, what we call tazkiyatun nafs. So fasting serves as a means to purify our souls, allowing individuals to reflect on their spiritual journey and intention. So it gives us a lot of time for self-reflection during the month of Ramadan, and not just cleaning ourselves and detoxing from all the impurities physically from our bodies, but also using Ramadan to detox ourselves. For example, there are some people that religiously on the first day of Ramadan say no social media for 1 month. Right? And there's people that will actually send a message like, I'll see you, I'll talk to you after Ramadan. Don't bother me during Ramadan. Right? Now obviously for some of us may need to have our phone on, right? But what I'm saying is, in Ramadan, that purifying ourselves will come when we leave other things. So it's not just about fasting, it's about staying away from Netflix, right? Or staying away from, I don't know what else is out there these days, I don't know, but staying away from all those things that are spiritually harmful to us. It's not just about, okay, staying a bit hungry and listen to a bit of Quran and then everything else is the same. We may have certain bad habits that we have. Ramadan is a good time to kick those habits. Like some people, for example, they give up smoking in Ramadan, for example, right? They take it up again on Eid, but that's a different story. But some people actually use that as a platform to never go back to smoking again, for example, right? So we need to, Allah mentions, لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ. Perhaps you will attain piety during Ramadan, but that piety will come with that spiritual, effort that we make. Then fasting, definitely, in Arabic we call it sabr, which is, we translate it in English as patience, but sabr entails a lot more than that. So it's developing self-control. So your fasting, you see a nice plate of food, it requires self-control, right? Like I said, even getting sexual gratification, your wife may be next to you, she's your wife. But Allah's command says that during this time, you will not be tempted, you will not move, you'll have self-control, right? Or some people may have other certain habits of looking at the wrong things, listening to the wrong things. The month of Ramadan is, I'm fasting. In one of the hadith that's very interesting, the Prophet ﷺ said, as-siyam or as-sawm junnatun, that it's a shield. It's a shield. So fasting, that's why some of the youth, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam advised the youth, those of you that do not have the means to get married, but you have the desire to get married, but you don't have the means yet, you haven't got your stuff together yet, fast. So the Prophet ﷺ said, what will take your desires away? So even those desires and inclinations that we have is fasting. So anyone who's young, who's got energy, they have desire to get married, but they're not quite ready yet, then the prescription for them would be to fast. So this brings about, self-control and resisting temptations, and it actually diminishes those temptations because eating actually fuels temptations. That's why even certain meats, there's a book called Prophetic Medicine, if you can ever get your hands on it, it's a very good book to read. That it's a book written by Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyah, one of the great scholars of Islam, where he talks about spiritual health and also physical health. And so therefore, when a person eats too much meat and these sort of things, desires creep into us. So Ramadan is developing that self-control. You know, how many of us get angry when we shouldn't? Anger is going a bit deep, but anger is, one of our teachers said, anger is the illegitimate child of kibr, of pride. A person who gets angry quickly and often, it means that they actually have a deeper issue, which is pride, right? So self-control, it's all about that self-control and resisting temptations and resisting negative behaviors in Ramadan. And then another spiritual significance comes with that. It's as soon as your stomach starts to grumble, which it will do guaranteed, especially on the first day, that grumbling should immediately make us reflect on those people around the world whose stomach's not grumbling by a choice of their own. I'm sure many of us have seen the vision, whether it's the children and the people in Gaza at the moment. May Allah relieve their suffering and accept all of them for the sacrifice they have made, in other parts of the world where they are not fasting by choice. So the Prophet, peace be upon him, he used to wake up in the morning and he would ask his wife, he would say, is there anything in the house to eat? And the wife would say, there's nothing to eat. So the Prophet ﷺ would make an intention to fast. It's said that for a period of 2 months passed and there was no food that was cooked in the house of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. There was no food. Now he wasn't choosing to fast. His situation was such that Allah put him in that situation where he had no choice. And therefore, one of the spiritual significance of fasting is, as soon as you don't have, as soon as your stomach's grumbling, as soon as you're thirsty, especially in summer. I remember when I became Muslim, it was the middle of summer. So it's actually moving back now. So it was literally, I remember, like in December, January, and you don't even want to eat. Some of us here would have experienced those Ramadans here, but you would just want to drink. That's it. Like you could drink a whole liter. Yeah, you just feel thirsty. You don't even feel like eating, right? In winter it's different. You actually get a bit of an appetite. So just imagine, so when you're in that state of thirst and hunger, you're thinking of those people, your heart and your mind goes straight away to those people who are less fortunate than us. And that's where the fasting encourages that empathy. You know, we're living in a world of like individualism, where it's all about me. It's all about me. It's all about what I want and what I have. And so Ramadan, the spiritual significance, one of the spiritual significances is that our hearts become more full of empathy and compassion towards those who are less fortunate. And this also fosters a sense of community support. That's when the community gets together and says, well, look, there are people that are needy. And that's why at the end of Ramadan, there's a little payment charity that is paid. It's not necessarily compulsory, but very much encouraged, which is called Zakatul Fitr, the charity of Fitr. And that money is to go to those who are less fortunate, right? But besides that, in Ramadan, we encourage you to put money towards, you know, helping people that cannot break. We're lucky we have something to break our fast with. We actually have, like, we're spoiled for choice, but there are people that don't have those choices like we have. So spiritual significance of fasting is very important. These are some things that are being mentioned, and we will leave it there for today and just open it up for Q&A. Firstly, related to the topic, keeping in mind that how do we fast? what makes up a valid fast and what breaks fasting. That will be discussed in session week 3 and 4. For this week, we're just talking about more the concept of Ramadan itself. So if anyone's got any questions, we might send, if needed, a mic to the sisters. Otherwise, the sisters can ask if you have any questions, firstly related to the topic or that we've discussed, and then we can open it up for some broader questions if needed, and then we can just sort of partake in whatever snacks are there and spend some time socializing before we call it a night, inshallah. Any questions at all? Just out of interest, Jake, you've been Muslim 2 years? 2 years now? Right. And long yourself?
Yeah.
A year?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, inshallah. And any feedback as well, how have you found tonight's presentation? Try not to wear that shirt during Ramadan, yeah? He's got a shirt that says pizza on it.
All a test.
Yeah. Any questions at all? Any feedback? Yeah?
A sister wants to know, like, in the month of Ramadan, can we read the Quran in English, or does it have to be in Arabic?
Okay, so those who have the ability to read it in Arabic should try their best to read it in Arabic as much as they can. But if someone doesn't have the capability, or even if they do have the capability, then it is very much encouraged to understand the meaning of the Quran. So that would be not only reading the English translation, but rather reading a commentary on the Quran, because translations are very some of the translations that are out there are better than others. Maybe we can recommend some on the group. So out of a few different translations that are out there, but more importantly is what is the message behind it.
So the tafsir.
The tafsir of it, the explanation of it, right? And that explanation requires either an expert, somebody who's licensed in it, or you read a book of someone who's licensed to comment, because not everyone, Quran is not open for everyone to interpret. So you have to have studied certain prerequisite subjects to be able to comment on the Quran. So as much as you can engage with the Quran, but obviously from a reading perspective, if we can read, then we should read as much of it as we can in the Arabic, and then on the side, have something in English that we can look at and read. But you won't get the same reward for reading it in English that you would in Arabic, right? So you'll get some benefit, but it's not the same. So in Arabic, when we read one letter, the Prophet ﷺ said, harfun, one letter, you get 10 rewards just for one letter. So the rewards that a person will get, even if you only know a couple of short chapters of the Quran, but you read that in Arabic again and again in Ramadan, is much more virtuous than you reading an English translation of it. But that doesn't take away from that in Ramadan. Try and understand the Quran. Usually, this year I haven't decided what we're doing here yet after Tarawih, but usually we don't talk for too long because people are quite tired. Usually it's about 10 minutes or so. But we are doing tafsir of Quran this year in one of our other courses that's open for adults on Saturdays. But during Ramadan, every masjid there will be some sort of talks related to, the Quran and the meaning of the Quran, etc. Any other questions or Jake? Anything? No?
Is it better to?
Yeah, sorry, is this another one?
Yeah, I wanted to ask what time does suhoor end?
What time does it end?
Yeah.
Well, it's not a specific time, but basically it's when Fajr, what we call Subuh, there's Subuh Kadhib and Subuh Sadiq. So what you'll find is, has anyone seen on the calendar sometimes it says Imsak?
Yeah.
So Imsak, just say for example, Fajr prayers comes in at 5:30, just for example, 5:30 a.m. Imsak will say, Imsak means to refrain. Amsak, like to refrain from something, right? It means that to try and finish up your coffee and whatever your breakfast is about 10 minutes before. But technically, if you woke up at 5:28 and there's 2 minutes left
Before Fajr.
you can technically still drink and eat something, but you have to make sure that as soon as it hits 5:30 that nothing goes down your throat. So you're taking a bit of a chance. But technically, because what happens is some people wake up and it's like, oh, there's only 5 minutes left. But even if there's only 5 minutes left, quickly have a sip of water and have a date. You can still do that. What breaks the fast and nullifies the fast is that if Fajr is coming in at 5:30 and at 5:31 you wake up at 5:40 and think, oh, I missed it, no harm in taking a bit of a cup full of water now, then you've broken your fast, right? And that's why getting up for that morning little, suhoor is very important, especially as a family, if we can do it as a family. So most families will do it as a family, wake everyone up. But sometimes it's a struggle and you might sleep past and feel too bad for that day. You're just going to be a bit more hungry at the end of the day or thirsty, you know what I mean? So I hope that answers the question, but obviously Fajr, the calendars will tell us what time Fajr starts. If you see imsak, that's just a prescription, like you could say it's preferable to start winding things up about 10 minutes before so that you don't end up eating over the time.
I've seen a reference that if you were to hold a string of, but we don't have that reference, right? Like on the horizon, if there's a light.
Yeah, that's right. There's what they call the white thread.
The white thread, yeah.
But the thing is, in Perth, you're not going to see it because it's too polluted.
Right?
Yeah.
So we just say Fajr is the ruling and we go for that.
And otherwise you'd have like a whole bunch of people standing outside with threads. Going like this. I mean, that's how, because remember at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, they didn't have clocks and stuff. So that was just a way of measuring. But that's a phenomenon that can only be seen when, probably if you go to the outskirts of Perth, out of the city area, you'd be amazed. Just drive, maybe a couple of hours out, 4 or 5 hours out east or something, and then look up at the sky at night. And it's like, where did all these stars come from? They're actually there, but in Perth there's so much pollution that we can't see the stars. So yeah, we can't really use that as a reference, but that's how measurements were done. Like that's why in some countries till today, to know the time of prayer, you'll see a little stick in the courtyard of the masjid, because the shadows determine what time of the day it is. So that's how they used to measure the times of the day. So when the shadow, when the sun goes past its zenith, when it goes past its zenith, plus the shadow that existed at zenith, then it's Zuhr time, for example, right? When there's a difference of opinion, but for the Asr prayer, the afternoon prayer, when the shadow of that stick is the same length plus 1.5, or some say 2, then that's when the afternoon prayer comes in. So that's how they used to be able to tell the times. But alhamdulillah, today we have clocks, and just make sure in Ramadan your clocks are all reset, they're at the correct time. Put your alarms on for suhoor, inshallah. Someone else was going to ask a question on the side? Or was it yourself?
I'll wait till next week.
Oh, okay. No worries.
What about in regards to like working in harsher conditions?
Yeah.
Say higher humidity, and as a new Muslim, the balance of like getting thirsty per se.
Yes.
In high humidity in the Pilbara.
Yeah.
And places like this.
Yeah. Fly in, fly out.
FIFO work sort of thing. What would you recommend as a way of navigating around getting the most out of Ramadan?
Yeah.
And
it's a very good question. So obviously we can't give a general answer on that, because it would be according to the specific circumstances. Basically, fasting is compulsory, but there are times when you can break the fast and you should break the fast. So even if you're not in the Pilbara or wherever, but you're just
Dehydrated.
halfway through the day and you're so dehydrated that you think you're going to faint, then you're allowed to break your fast. You'll have to make up the fast, but you're allowed to, and you should break the fast if you feel your health is, deteriorating for it. So in a work situation, the person will have to look at their personal circumstances and see, the fly in, fly out, they could potentially fall under the category of a traveller, depending on how long they're going to be there. So depending on which ruling you take, fasting is not compulsory for someone who is sick or has a certain sickness, and it's not compulsory for someone who's traveling. So if you're traveling during Ramadan, you don't have to fast. So there's a dispensation for people who are traveling, right? And Allah mentions that in the Quran, right? So safar, it's called travel, is suffer. Maybe because when you travel, you actually start suffer a bit.
They need to make it up?
Yes.
You make it up, right?
Yeah. So if you're traveling, and it's a bit tricky because one time I was traveling to South Africa actually, and so which way is the sun? It's like you're flying away from the sun or towards the sun. All I know is that was a long, like we chose to fast, but you end up fasting longer, right? But then one time I was coming back from Port Hedland, I think, and we were in the aeroplane, so we were still fasting on the way back to Perth. So the time for Maghrib was 6:30, but we were in the plane and we could clearly see the sun. So then this discussion took place that do we break our fast or not? So the ruling on that is, if you can see the sun personally yourself, even though at that moment on the ground it's sunset, it's not your sunset. So we had to fast, I think, an extra 45 minutes and until the plane descended and we could no longer see the sun, and then we could break our fast. That's if you choose to fast. So people do fast when they're traveling. It's not that just because someone's traveling they don't fast, but you do have that dispensation that if you're fasting, if you're traveling, you don't have to fast, but you'll have to make the fast up. So I think it would be better if anyone's in that circumstance to come and seek advice according to their specific circumstances. But in general, if it's really hard yakka and they're feeling, well, I can't get through, there could be grounds there for them not to necessarily fast, but they would have to make it up at some point. You know what I mean? So the fasting in Ramadan cannot be, it has to be made up if you miss it.
So what do you mean by making it up?
Meaning you have to
don't
then
fast for 10 days, you fast for 10
then you have
or zakat and pay for those.
Yeah, so then you have, for example, if you become sick in Ramadan and you can't fast for 10 days, then when Ramadan's finished, between that Ramadan and the next Ramadan, you have to make up that fast during the course of the year. So you could do one fast every month for the next 10 months, and then you make it up.
So is the value of the made-up fast the same as one during Ramadan?
No, it's not. I mean, you're still obligated to make it up. You still will get rewarded for it, but it's not going to be the same as the fast that is done in the month of Ramadan. So the reward-wise will always be less.
Even for females?
Okay, for females, so actually it's good that these questions are being asked, but obviously in the third and fourth session we'll go more into that. So for females, they cannot fast when they're menstruating, and they then have to make up that fast after Ramadan, right? So that's always a very challenging thing for the sisters, but having a few women in my family, it's possible. It can be done. It can be done. But I'm sure that has now ignited some questions from the sisters side. Any questions from the sisters side? Don't feel shy, inshallah, because this is the place to ask. If it's something that I cannot necessarily answer now, then we can defer it. But any questions on the sisters side? No. The brothers were all good.
Thank you, Sheikh.
Yeah. Are we good, sisters? Just before we close, you're all good? All right, inshallah.
Also, Sheikh, so
Yeah.
like for new Muslims that are trying to get more of an insight into prayer, wudu,
Yeah.
and the basics around things, that you're starting up a new, is there going to be another?
Yeah, so that's
semester?
so obviously this is a short course for Ramadan, and then obviously we'll have Ramadan. And then in term 2, we will likely start some foundational courses as well. We haven't quite decided what, but I understand, and we've had that discussion, that I think a lot of us need that basic again, in the sense of purity, prayer, 5 pillars, 6 pillars of faith as well. So when we say, well, what do we believe in Islam, what does that surround? So we'll always try and maintain it. If we don't do it in our main session, then we will always have a little short session after that, where we used to break up into groups. So someone needs to learn more about prayer, someone needs to learn more about this, more about that. We have a few volunteers here, and that's when we can get potentially for 10 or 15 minutes get into those groups. But that's a ongoing discussion. Actually, it might be worth getting everyone's feedback through a poll or something that we can do on WhatsApp. I think it's important to maybe, because we have all of you who are attending here, and then we have the other group that's attending in Coburn. And therefore, we'll probably have that discussion, get some feedback from everyone as what's important to you to learn. Because there's no point us coming here and delivering something and feeling great about it when it just went straight over your head, or what you actually need is not being addressed. So, yeah. Yeah.
A sister wants to know, which I'm curious to know, with the intention of fasting, are we supposed to do that daily or at the beginning of Ramadan?
So there's a difference of opinion amongst the scholars. And so according to some scholars, they say that the intention has to be made daily and renewed daily before any time between Maghrib and Fajr. That's why in some countries like Malaysia and Indonesia and places like that, that are predominantly from a particular school of thought, from a jurisprudent perspective of the Shafi school, the Imam will, after the Tarawih, he will remind people to make their intention, and everyone will make their intention. So that's just as a reminder. So because some consider it compulsory that for your fast to be valid, your intention has to be made prior to that day of fasting. There is another opinion, and this was the opinion of Imam Malik, who was one of the great 4 Imams who resided in Medina. He said that you only need to make one intention at the beginning of the month. So what we usually recommend people to do, and I usually remind the congregation on the first night, I remind everyone to make an intention for the whole month. But then I also encourage them to renew that intention daily, right? So I think the best way would make an intention as a backup plan, you know, like when you back up your phone in case you lose something. So do a backup plan, make an intention for the whole month, but every day, renew that intention. Usually it's best to just do it sometime in the evening before going to sleep, that I intend to perform a compulsory fast tomorrow, that's it. Or if you're going to wake up for suhoor, then you can make it at that time. The problem is sometimes if we oversleep, then you may not have made your intention. So it's better to make your intention prior to going to sleep if possible. Inshallah. All right, so I'm glad that that's the interaction that I want. So, as we go along, I'm sure that more questions will come up, and next week we'll just go along the same lines. And then week 3 and 4, week 3 will be an emphasis on what makes up a valid fast. So what do you have to do, and what do you have to refrain from will be in week 4. So and what you have to refrain from. And week 4 will be all those things that nullify your fast and any related type of things, so any other related type of questions that you may have, concerning Ramadan. Inshallah. So we'll probably stop there, inshallah, and feel free to partake before we back away in any refreshments, and maybe want to spend a few minutes to mingle. We'll probably wrap it up